Hi folks, welcome to Hat Friday. This is Friday's podcast, videocast from iWrite Radio. I've got Jimmy Hutton and Stuart Lockhead with me today. I'm Norrie Stewart. We're going to go with Nicholas Sturgeon's press conference as per usual, and then I think we might have a wee chat about the galloping idiot that is Jackson Carlaw. He seems to have outdone himself with his tweets and his interview with Adam Bolton from Sky. Stuart, today's press conference, you've got a couple of headline quotes you'd like to give us?
Yes. To be honest, it was it was a bit low key, but she was announcing, she was doing a re-announcement of what's going to happen this week in the way of, she was doing a bit of, let's be honest, she was doing a bit of, here's some good news, just for a change. And we can't fault her for that. And so she summed up what was going to be relaxed next week. But in the meanwhile, she could, in doing so, she did put in some exceptions. She said, she mentioned that worship, which would include regular worship, funerals, weddings, they would be allowed, but only 20 people. And then she got a question by the press later, why only 20 people? And that was explained. Plus another thing to do with worship and singing. Well, singing was with another question.
Stuart, that was a belter, eh? Will this kind of singing be worse than that kind of chanting for passing on the virus? And I'm pretty sure Nicola at that point's thinking, really? Ballbag, where did you get that question?
Well, and she came out with I forget, I don't have the exact quote, but she suggested the journalist had experience of singing in a karaoke. And there was a difference between that and the singing in a choir, but on the other hand, anyway, she left it to Jason Leach, the clinical director, to explain why singing was a bad idea when it comes to the virus.
Well, some churches, they have a really good time with their singing. It's like going to a nightclub.
It's not. Well, yeah,
the evangelical churches really go for it.
Yeah, but you're suggesting that she wants to stop people having a good time at church.
Well, I don't think they should be allowed to have a good time at church myself, but that's,
neither do I. But that's by the by.
That's an atheist's view,
Anyway, it would have proved that there were early days of this virus pandemic in various parts of the world, specifically South Korea and Washington State, the US of A, choirs that carried on meeting after they'd been told not to, became hotspot outbreaks.
Well, if they've got the science to back it up, good stuff. I found this new move into phase 3 quite confusing.
Well, I agree with you, Nora, because when it comes to how many people can you meet in a group and how many groups and when, I just got lost. Did you understand it?
I take it that's pointed at you, Jimmy.
Aye, well, to be honest with you, mate, I think a lot of it is confusing. There's a lot of information out there to kind of take in all at the same time as to where you can meet people, when you can meet them, how many households, how many in total, what kids up to the age of 12 can do, what kids after the age of 12. But I think they're kind of taking it as read that most of us will sort of apply common sense. You might not actually count the number of people that you're meeting, but you know that small gatherings are okay. You know that medium-sized gatherings might be okay outside, and large gatherings just are kiboshed for now. So I think they're relying on a wee bit of common sense to be applied by people.
I'm glad you think that's simple.
I'm gonna
maybe it's my age, but even I'm still confused.
I'm gonna slip into my union press journalist clothing for a moment and I would like to ask her, if you've got more than one lover, do you have to visit them on different days?
That one, I'd forgotten about that one. Yes, this was when it was allowed in England 2 or 3 weeks ago that two people, let's keep it simple, basically, if you've got a relationship with another person, whether it's a man or a woman, it's up to you. But if you haven't been able to get together because of the restrictions, you were allowed. This was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there was a headline in the Sun or something about it. It was a lovers' charter. Today was the day that it was announced that this could also happen in Scotland. I don't believe if there was any other Scotland were waiting this long for 3 months, 3.5 months to get together and have a.
Well, I fully expect Jackson Carlaw to start tweeting about swingers being left behind.
Hold it, mate. Surely swingers clubs are sin died for anybody involved in Scottish politics since the Manchester one was such a douchey for them years back.
So no group sex, Jimmy. What a bummer.
Look,
well,
we're missing out on the biggest. The headline will be, of course, what I prefer to call masks. I don't know why they keep avoiding that. Face coverings. I mean, bloody hell. They are now legal, or the law, sorry, Sean. They are now the law in Scotland, almost everywhere. Again, 90% of it is fairly clear, but there's a 10% edge that you just wonder, right, so if you go into a shop and you don't want to wear a mask, and this the person behind the counter doesn't want you in there without a mask, can the staff person tell you to leave? She never answered. She wasn't asked that question. She never answered that question.
Well, I would imagine if you wanted to tell a customer to leave because they weren't obeying the law, you'd be entitled to do that. But she did make the point she didn't expect either shop owners or shop workers to enforce that law. In other words, she doesn't even want somebody getting hit with a bottle.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I understand
because
that.
some guys not wearing a face mask.
I've read a good one already for, I believe it was East Kilbride or somewhere, where it was beautifully written, but it was just a wee meme on Facebook that kind of entertained me, where standing in the queue, boy, gammon at the front, so you can where it's gone when they describe the person as a gammon, having a hissy fit because they're not getting, and basically somebody in the crowd shouted, "Oh, ball bag, put your face mask on or fuck off." And that's the kind of thing that will happen over the weekend, but hopefully there's no stairhead rammies about it.
Just an aside, I've discovered that I might be described as a gammon, but I don't know how to do it yet. So do you know where I can get some training?
What, to be a gammon?
You didn't want to be a gammon, mate. Basically just watch everything that Jackson Carlaw does and do that with a bit more, once more with feeling, shall we say.
Aye, watch Carlaw and press repeat.
He's not worth repeating.
You'd need to move an awful long way to the right to qualify.
Aye. The Gammonati are considerably further right than you are, Stuart, mate.
Very much further right than you are, Stuart.
Oh,
you'd have to go so far right that you'd fall off the edge of the world.
So I can reject the accusation. It's maybe just my appearance.
So far to your right that you're halfway across the Forth, mate.
And if you got all the way across the Forth, you'd be in left country.
Oh, aye.
Apart from round Perth, probably.
Oh, I've lived in Fife. I could live there again.
There's some lovely places in the glorious kingdom.
I'm not sure they'd want you, but never mind.
That's another story.
Anything else come out of the presser?
I don't know. World Health Organization, apparently. Jason Leach was there, which surprising. He's normally good value. You know, he's like, if he's there, you're going to get a few quotes. He was a bit low key. I didn't understand
but his WHO quote I thought was quite a good one.
Well, go ahead. I didn't write it down.
No, I better put my glasses on. I can't see that. That's my age, you see.
Happy birthday, Jimmy.
Hi, Barry. This is not controlled. This is not controlled in much of the world and worsening in many countries, which it's easy to forget. Even with the decent coverage that we get and the rolling coverage that we get, and numbers increasing elsewhere, easy to forget that this thing is worldwide and we're nowhere near halfway through it.
Can I make a suggestion that the reason we're not seeing the headlines on the BBC, etc., on the news programs, is because the UK has done so badly.
Aye, they still didn't want comparisons to be made.
They still can't afford.
Well, that's another reason
to make the comparisons.
Why we need to have at least one episode of this show discussing just how dangerous the swerve to the far right is in this country.
I think we need to be aware that, you know, you're reaching for strange media sources in these times. Obviously, your Channel 4 News and BBC Newsnight actually had quite a particularly good piece by Alan Little last night about Scotland. It was remarkably unbiased for the BBC.
But that's what to do with Alan Little.
Aye, exactly. But it's interesting that other than them, where do you go for your news? I know Stuart likes the Irish press and the New York Times and things like that. I've been the same. You're looking at a much wider area of the planet from which to gather your news these days, because you just can't trust a lot of the British press.
I mean, it's becoming, it's the media that worries me most, because if the media aren't there to tell us the truth, we won't know just how bad things have got until it's too late.
I've got a wee clip from Al Jazeera here. Would you like to see it?
Have you? Barry?
Oh, that's good.
Share. I need to find it. That's the problem.
Oh, there's that business for Scotland, Paul.
Yeah. Here we go. This is from Al Jazeera.
Bert has been dreaming of Scottish independence for as long as he can remember. He regards the English establishment as imperialists who stamped all over Scotland, just as they...
Oh, sorry, guys.
What happened to Bert?
We've got the point, though.
Bert has been dreaming of Scottish independence for as long as he can remember. He regards the English establishment as imperialists who stamped all over Scotland, just as they did the colonies. The fact that the independence campaign narrowly lost the referendum 6 years ago doesn't matter to him, because he believes his day will still come.
The yes people who are still there, they're still as strong as they were. The people that were marching, the people that march in marches in Glasgow and Edinburgh and all over, they're still, they haven't given it up, but and they won't.
Bert lives in Dundee, the heartland of independence. Support for leaving the UK and going it alone polls around 65% here. Now it's going in that direction everywhere else as well. Trust in the Scottish First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has rocketed since she appeared to be in control of the virus response in Edinburgh, while the government in London is widely regarded as chaotic and incompetent. Add to that the outright hostility in Scotland to Brexit, and you get a lot of good news for Scottish nationalists.
They have obviously recognised that the UK government have been so inept in their handling that I think it has persuaded a lot of people who perhaps were not supporters of independence that we can actually manage our own affairs better. And I think when you look at how Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government have handled the pandemic, it's a big contrast to Boris Johnson and the UK Government.
The question increasingly being asked here is how big a lead do the nationalists have to have before it becomes impossible for London to refuse another referendum on independence? The extraordinary collision of the pandemic response and Brexit have combined to put support for Scottish independence across the country at around 54%, and there's not even any independence campaigning going on. The view among Scottish nationalists is that the government in London is doing a very good job on their behalf.
That's Al Jazeera. Could you imagine the BBC ever finishing?
No, we never
like
get
that.
But I think, thank you very much. No, you just made a point. So I think we need to sort of have an episode of this show just discussing what the media, the lack of media coverage is doing to our liberties, not just for the Scottish independence cause, but also for the freedoms that English people are having removed from them as well.
But it brings about an interesting point there. But just in his wee piece there, though, they talked about what kind of lead do we need to have, because there's been a couple of, well, Pete Wishart and Alan Smith, let's name them, have been kind of disparaging about the fact that a 46% poll came out at the weekend. They've been like, oh, but we're in the middle of a pandemic, it's only a couple of polls in that. I'm kind of, well, let's be honest, I'm raging that people who make their living from the SNP, and a very good living as well, let's be honest, being an MP in London pays you a damn fine salary.
Aye.
And they are very, very quick off the mark to try and dampen down people's enthusiasms for what I think is it's not just that poll, it's the trend, it's the way that are going. And why on earth do serving SNP MPs feel the need to rain on that parade?
Well, look, can I just
particularly
bring
Alan Smith, because he behaved abysmally in Parliament yesterday, as far as I'm concerned.
I think it's incumbent on these members of both Holyrood and Westminster to state the level at which they believe we can go for an independence referendum.
Oh, no, come on, Nori, that's not...
Poo-pooing 54% is not the way to go.
Yeah, Nori, that's almost no longer the issue, the question of whether we go for a referendum. And look at the amount of material this week is offering alternatives. Look, the point I made and why we went down this road was about the media coverage. You've just mentioned, Jimmy, you just mentioned Pete Wishart, and you've just mentioned Alan Smith. And today we have an article by David Pratt. It would look that the only media press, the only press, non-broadcasting media in Scotland that does support independence is entirely in the pocket of the SNP as well. So we're not getting an alternative viewpoint at all.
David Pratt's piece was really about the danger of factionalism within the SNP. It wasn't really about the referendum when and if it should be held. It was really about the SNP not falling foul of what the Labour Party has fallen foul of for generations.
Oh, now you'll get Jimmy and I going there about factionalism in the left.
Well,
we had a discussion about this earlier this week. I don't know if it was recorded.
Well, I mean, my view has always been that is the sickness of the left. They cannot damp down their own personal views in order to get the Labour Party into power.
And then they scream about the control freakery and message control of the SNP. Message control is a bad thing. But when we're talking about factionalism, particularly this week, you're looking at not necessarily the SNP as such. You're looking at the Yes movement as a whole. And there's machinations going on within the party. I would argue around the GRA, for example, around not even which wing. I think it's pretty clear who's in control of the party, the leader of the party. But there's an awful lot of jockeying going around. Probably not even at the second level, but the third level of the party. There's a heck of a lot of jockeying going on for position and for influence. And perhaps Nicola might want to stomp upon a bit of that jockeying. As I say, I think Alan Smith, I don't know if you've seen anything yesterday in Parliament, mate, but they were talking about trans women partaking in women's sport, and he used the term abusers for people who are against that. That's a shocking use of language. I'm pretty sure he knew exactly what he was doing. I have worries. I have my thoughts about the guy that'll no bother broadcasting, but I worry that the whole issues around sex and gender are being used to try and split what is effectively a very united party. I'm babbling on again, guys. Sorry. My main worry is that at the moment where the SNP has the strongest support ever, and independence has the strongest support ever, people are sniping from the sidelines and trying to pull it apart, and that's a worry.
But it's not in any way the least bit surprising. You could have said 10 years ago, if we were going to be in this, this situation with a wee bit of a solid majority at 54%, a London government in chaos, you could have predicted 10 years ago that this kind of splits would apparently appear. But don't forget what we're up against. One of the most sophisticated colonial governments in recent history.
Yeah, only because they can't use gunboats anymore. That's why they've got sophisticated. I'd like to bastardize a well-known saying, which is power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
We haven't quite got there yet.
Well, I actually think that the power element of that is pertinent to this, because I think power divides. I think once you're in power, certain minorities, I think it's fair to say, look to get on that power bandwagon for their own agendas.
Mhm.
Well, there are many people who would suggest that power is more addictive than even heroin.
Aye, well,
And
I
that's
think
a
the
problem the SNP, I think, have stepped into.
Yeah,
and
I think they've been,
blinkered on it.
I think they've been particularly successful, given how long they've been in government in Scotland. They've been particularly successful that there haven't really been fiefdoms created by people within positions of power in the party. You know what I mean? There's been a unity of purpose because we've been working towards independence that perhaps has precluded these fiefdoms from being created. And now that we're buying into the narrative that the independence thing has been stalled, that's where all these splitters are appearing. And perhaps they're no splitters at all. Perhaps they're just people who they need refocused. We need a campaign, and that campaign has to be around independence, because at the moment there's too much going on.
Well, I would go with Peter Bell. I mean, day by day, his idea of us, instead of campaigning for independence, campaigning to dissolve the current, they dissolve the union, becomes more and more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to come up with a slogan that is as simple as independence. He needs campaigning to dissolve the union does not have that crisp, easily understood message that I want independence has.
But can I point on also the one thing I've got gathered? I mean, I've got a lot of respect for David Pratt, and especially his foreign reports, and I've respected his solid support for independence. However, I mean, I'm not going to quote it. I could do, but no, I can't because of. Oh yeah, in fact, his article.
You're ready.
It's a short one. You're all right. In fact, he said he's talking in the middle of he's talking about internal squabbling in the SNP. In fact, I'll go further and say the level of tactical naivety I see around the movement right now in letting itself be sucked into internal squabbling of the my nationalism is better than your nationalism variety borders on the idiotic. But what he doesn't say, he lays all the blame on everybody else. This is what you know where my position is. Look, if you're in charge, you accept responsibility. The top of the SNP for the situation of potential splitters. It's their own fault.
I'm sorry. I mean, Stuart, you and I have been broadcasting in one form or another for years, and I've been talking about this for years. Once you get into a position of power, once you become a successful political party, there's always division created. I mean, the SNP were unique in holding it off so long. And it's the death. Well, it's the death knell. It's why every time there's an argument in the SNP, it's the death knell, according to every unionist headline writer in the country. It's another civil war, because that's how you destroy parties.
It's occurred to me that, if we take from, say, 2007 as the starting point into where we are now, and we're talking about power and people getting jobs and all the rest of it, over the period of those 13 years, almost year by year, there's been more and more possible appointments, and there's been more and more MSPs, more and more MPs, more and more potential people getting appointed to boards. But now possibly they've just hit the wall. They can't offer any more to keep people happy.
I didn't necessarily think it's so much to that, because let's be honest, I didn't think the SNP have dived into a political appointments thing half as much as they may have done. I think that's why they still have problems with health boards, for example. And they've not put in enough SNP policemen in places like COSLA, for example, and that's why they're still getting issues with them. But I think one of the worst things that we can do is navel gaze, and I think that's what the SNP are doing now. Like I say, they need the campaign for this election. My God, they need the campaign.
I think that's the answer, Jimmy. I think the torch has to be held up again, so everybody can see and they know what they're aiming for, and
Well,
stop
they're not,
giving
people
each
won't-
other
look,
kickings.
People won't follow another campaign with another false promise.
Sorry, where was the false promise in the last independence campaign?
Referendums. We've had false promises for the last 3 or 4 years. Come on.
All right, so
Stuart, but we've had
you're
this
going to
discuss-
stop voting SNP then, are you?
No, of course not.
Well,
Stuart,
people are
we've had
going to
this
follow.
discussion before, mate. I am embarrassed that Theresa May got to treat us with such contempt, to say now is not the time and just get away with that. Every
I
Scot
agree.
should be embarrassed by that. But there was a political reality going on that in this parliamentary term, to put a referendum in place, there wasn't that much time. We had what, 2015 they got in the parliament. 2016 we got the Brexit malarkey, the Brexit campaign. So that was 2016 ruled out. 17 and 19 we've had British general elections. So it was really only 2018 that we could have squeezed one in.
It would have been difficult, and it would have, I think, been. They would have made it a double vote on the day of a general election, and I think that would have caused even more problems.
I didn't think it should ever be a double vote. I think the next independent, there will be a referendum, whether it's an actual indie ref or whether it's to ratify a decision that is made for us on behalf of the courts or the Scottish Parliament. There will have to be one, and I think it should stand on its own 2 feet. It shouldn't be along.
I saw a suggestion today that I hadn't thought of, but someone suggested that I think they're going to immobilise the Scottish, emasculate the Holyrood Parliament bit by bit rather than by simply major changes. But if they did clearly announce, because they could see that the SNP were going to have a huge majority at Holyrood next May, and if they did make terrible, huge power grabs, as has been suggested, the plan should be then to, at that point, when the anger is up, is to turn the May election into a vote for independence or a vote to dissolve the union.
I didn't think they'd be quite so stupid. I think they're going to. I think what we're going to talk about with Jackson Carlo, basically saying that he's happy for Westminster to repatriate as many powers from Holyrood as it wants. I think that's what they'll do. I think they're all going to get called power grabs, and they're going to tell you it's not a power grab because it's in the interest of the internal market of the UK. That whole phrase and that whole argument is designed to obfuscate and just turn people off from the argument.
It's too late. It doesn't matter. There won't be a discussion. They have the power to do it, and it'll go through on the nod. It won't even be discussed at Westminster. They'll just do it.
But only because these Henry VIII powers are yet to be challenged. We need to challenge them at some point.
But nobody's going to challenge them.
How not?
Nobody's going to challenge them when it comes to Holyrood. That's for certain.
Why?
Even if the Welsh government goes absolutely apeshit, the Labour Party will acquiesce.
The Welsh government doesn't have what the Welsh government doesn't have what the Scottish government has.
No, but why would the Labour Party listen to the SNP Scottish government?
Okay,
it doesn't matter. They'd have to listen to the Scottish people. The people are sovereign. Holyrood's no sovereign. Westminster's no sovereign either.
Here's a bit of blue sky thought, guys. At what point do the liberals, we'll call them liberals rather than lefties or right wing, in England realise that they need to get together with the people of Scotland to defeat what's happening in London?
Never. Why?
They're not interested.
We are now a separate country. The Labour Party haven't quite realised that yet. In terms of politics, the Labour Party haven't realised it. They still think there's life in the Labour Party in Scotland. So they will fight. they will fight the Labour Party position. And the Labour Party position will never be to work together with the SNP. Never. It's just not going to happen. They can't win an election. The minute they work with the SNP, the English people will refuse to vote for them on the principle that Nicola Sturgeon is driving Westminster. So
on the principle that she's leading them by the nose.
The Tories, The Tories have no need or interest in Scottish votes, so they'll do whatever they want.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking about an election because we don't have a general
Well,
election.
I'm not talking about
I'm
I'm not talking about an election. I'm talking about the thinking in the Labour Party.
Well,
The Labour Party don't give a stuff about Scotland.
No, you're right. I must admit, I was thinking of a broader church than the Labour Party. I was thinking about people like Julian Maughan and various people that might go to court. And they already went to court jointly with, say, Joanna Cherry over some issues. I was thinking more in that direction rather than where you guys have gone.
Well,
no, I'm not, man. It was just a blue sky thinking. I did say so.
With Jeremy Corbyn in the driving seat, there might have been an outside chance that he would have supported moves from Scotland through the courts. Keir Starmer will not do that.
No.
He is now part of the Westminster system. The Labour Party are back embedded in the elite system, and forget it. As for I thought you were talking about the Liberal Democrats. I'd forgotten they even exist because that's how important they are.
No, I wasn't thinking of I wasn't thinking of particular parties at all. More like Julian Maughan and these people.
Well, I'll tell you. Here's something for you. There's every chance that if they don't get a second independence party off the ground by the Holyrood elections next year, that the Green Party could be the third biggest party in Holyrood. Mm-hmm. There's a thought for you.
And
I don't think you explain that a bit. I don't see they're going to have to take their votes from where.
Yes, well, let's presume that this second independence party doesn't get off the ground. There's only one other party apart from the SNP supports independence. That's the Green Party. If the second independence party doesn't get off the ground, and the number of people that now understand how default works might just put their vote into a Green ballot box.
But come on, both you guys have complained about the Greens being too left wing.
I thought they're not too left wing. They're nuts.
They're too green.
They're crazy.
They're but Norrie's right. They will pick up a fair few votes because there are people out there that are now determined to. They think that they have two votes, so they need to vote for two parties. They need to use their list vote. They didn't quite understand the actual proportionality of proportional representation, and they're desperate to have 70 or 80% of seats at Holyrood of about 55, 56% of the vote. So the Greens could pick up a fair few seats next year.
But the question that's got to be asked is, why do they want a 70, 80 seat majority in Holyrood? I don't believe that's the main reason for the...
No, they don't want the majority. They want a disproportionate result. They want more indie supporting MSPs.
No, I think it's more sophisticated now. They want the SNP to change policy in a number of ways, and that's the route to achieve it.
That's the label that's been hung around it, mate. I think it's more simple than that. I think it's ambitious lefties that fancy their chances of getting themselves a 5-year job at Holyrood on 60-odd grand a year.
I need to see, as I keep saying, need to see the manifestos, but I would not rule it out.
I've not ruled it out either. It's just
this election for me is a one-off. This election, I want as many MSPs in Holyrood that support independence as possible. And frankly, if it means gaming the Deloitte system, I don't care.
I've not ruled it out either, but somebody put some interesting figures yesterday, just how many SNP votes these parties are going to need to get representatives into Parliament. And it's not a small number. They are, 10 months away from an election now? None of them have come out of the shadows, really. We've got Colette, whatever her name is, who, let's be clear, there's been a bit of a backlash against her personally, which I think is outrageous. But I can understand SNP officials being annoyed at her because she was an SNP official herself. And she chose to walk away from the party to set up a separate party. So she's not going to get an easy ride with the SNP. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
And the rest of them are in the shadows. They're all hiding. They're not willing to come forward and show themselves yet.
This horse has been well flogged by us. Jackson Carlaw is busy recruiting for the independence cause again. Apparently, Jackson thinks that The UK market, which 60% of Scottish produce apparently goes to, would be damaged if we didn't all have the same food standards. He doesn't seem to understand that if we have higher food standards in Scotland, that wouldn't be a problem. It's only if we had lower
Come on,
standards.
sorry, I've got to still come up with the old argument. Surely the farmers in Scotland don't support that point of view.
No, they don't. But he doesn't care about the farmers. He doesn't. He's making a point on behalf of London that he has to make. He's been given the line about 60%. He's been given that line and told to push it because that's what they're going to push from London. So doesn't care about voters.
Jackson Carlow's function in life is not to support his constituents. His function in life is to support the government at Westminster. And the sooner people realise that, the better.
Oh yeah,
that's his total function.
I just wanted to clarify.
Oh right, sorry. I mean, I thought you were making a serious point there.
We had Rhys Mogg insulting us again yesterday.
I missed this, Jimmy. What did he do?
Goodness, mate, it almost escapes me. It seems that long ago. What was it yesterday? Oh, it was a question for Tommy Shepherd. Was it Tommy Shepherd?
No, that was ages ago.
That was the one last week, but I think it might have been Tommy Shepherd again yesterday that he decided to try and insult. The one last week, obviously, he was calling us a region. But the thing yesterday...
a district, wasn't it?
Aye, a region, a district. The thing yesterday, what was that? God.
You've got to ask why he's doing it, because it's very deliberate. It's not an accident.
Yeah.
I seriously think they're trying to get the backs of the English voters up against Scotland. They need to denigrate Scotland because once this pandemic's over and they look at how the Scottish government managed it against the Westminster government, they're not going to be able to answer an awful lot of questions.
Here's a good question, gentlemen, because this time is running on. The holiday election is in May next year. Do you believe that we'll be through this pandemic? Now, who decides when we're through it, the other side, by the time that election comes round?
Are we using Boris Johnson's measuring stick, or are we using Nicola Sturgeon's measuring stick?
I go with World Health Organization rather than anybody else.
We won't be through it for years.
Aye, we'll be living with this for the next decade.
So will there be an excuse to cancel the election by Westminster?
No. I'm afraid
no.
Even if the election had been this year in the middle of this pandemic, I don't think they'd have cancelled it. I think they'd have found some way to run it. Because cancelling...
What if there's a bigger peak, a second wave is bigger than what we've had already over the winter?
No.
Okay.
I'd struggle to see how they could. I'd struggle to see how they justify cancelling an election, mate. It's a massive step to take.
Okay. Right.
Besides which, I would predict that before Christmas, England will be fully open, regardless of where the pandemic is.
Christmas. You know that Christmas brought down. I think it was the time of the English Civil War, misnamed, of course. One of the biggest reasons why the royal monarch was brought back was because the English were so upset about losing Christmas because it was banned by the Puritans.
Right. Well, I predict by Christmas, Boris Johnson will have declared the pandemic over and done with. There you are. And it won't matter how many people are dying. Because he'll need to get the economy up and running and open again, or his mates that bankroll this party will not be happy.
What do you think he's going to call these goods inspection areas in Northern Ireland? Because he can't call them goods inspection areas, can he?
He's going to call them fairy castles.
Right. That might work for him, actually, with his strange haircut, and I suppose he could always get a zip line from the fairy castle to the ferry as well. That might work for Boris.
He's going to stand up at some point outside one of these as he's cutting the ribbon and claim that he never said there wouldn't be border posts. I mean, down the line, the lies that are going to be told.
Sorry, there's nowhere he can't go after making Phelan Grayling the head of the Intelligence Committee.
Can you actually believe that a man with a track record like that
Yes,
is going to chair the Intelligence Committee?
yes, because Dominic Cummings is in charge.
If they had an incompetence committee or an idiot committee, he would be the ideal chair.
Why are you surprised at what Dominic Cummings is up to? You've got to rewind. Chaos is the plan.
He's and on that depressing note, guys, I think we should finish because everybody's ears will be bleeding.
Aye, we've babbled on a hell of a long time this afternoon.
Yeah.
Have a nice birthday, Jimmy.
Cheers, mate.
21 again, Jim.
I wish.
Well, half of 26.
Aye, double 26 is closer, mate. Aye.
Thanks, Jimmy Hutton. Thanks, Stuart Lockhead. I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, folks. He's got to get that bloody bye-bye in.
Mm-hmm.